So in this first video of our next unit, the Constitution, the new government, you're going to be learning about the Articles of Confederation and the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. So make sure you're taking excellent notes. So the Revolutionary War is finally over and we have to establish a government. The first central government that the U.S. establishes is known as the Articles of Confederation. Basically what the Articles of Confederation established was a Congress, very similar to the Second Continental Congress, where you had delegates from each state and they had the power to become involved or to, sign treaties with other nations. But all 13 of the states had to agree on all of the amendments to the Constitution, and 9 out of the 13 states had to agree on federal laws. So this made it a little difficult to actually get their jobs done. Breaking it down even further, let's take a look at what the Congress could do and could not do under the Articles of Confederation. So Congress could raise armies, they could declare war, and they could sign treaties with foreign nations. They couldn't, however, raise money through taxes, and they couldn't regulate trade and collect taxes. So they had no money coming into government. Because the new states, this new country, was so afraid that they were going to establish a British monarchy in parliament that they just got away from, they fought so hard to get independence, they didn't want to create something similar to what they came from. So under the Articles of Confederation, each state, each individual state had more power than the central or the federal government. The states had more power to say what they were going to do what they wanted, than what the federal government could actually dictate. This causes a problem when you're trying to be one unified country. You're not 13 individual countries, it's one country with 13 states underneath that. So that was giving the newly formed United States of America some drama. The best way to kind of explain what the Articles of Confederation were like, if you take the White House, which didn't exist back then, but the Articles of Confederation was trying to support the White House, like in this picture. You can see that it's two skinny things that are in the middle of it. So if this were actually true, if we were actually take two sticks like this and we were to put something on top of it, the house or the object or whatever it is that we're putting on top of these two sticks would topple to either side. So it's not a good foundation. It was very, very, very weak. On the flip side, when we have the Constitution, it's like that Constitution, when we finally get around to writing it, is that bottom foundation. It's across the entire White House and it's thick, which means that it was a lot stronger than the Articles of Confederation. So let's figure out some of the weaknesses in the Articles of Confederation. First issue is money, currency issues. The United States federal government did not have a common currency. So people were carrying things from the federal government, they were carrying things from state governments, and they were even still paying with British pounds and shillings. So there was no unified currency. If I were using New York dollars or New York money in the state of New York, if I were to go into New Jersey, I couldn't use that. So it became very difficult to actually have trade and to do business in different parts of the country because there was no unified currency. What happens when people stop accepting money from outside of their own state is that a lot of the money then becomes worthless. What happens if you move to Pennsylvania and you were once living in Virginia? All that money now means nothing. So this causes inflation. Expenses go up, you're getting paid less, and the value of money is literally trash. It doesn't mean anything. What you used to pay $1 for, you're now paying $50 for. That's what inflation is. Reason number 2 why the Articles of Confederation fail is debt. After the French and Indian War, the British government was in debt and they started taxing the colonists. And the colonists started freaking out, not because they were being taxed, but because they weren't being represented in their government, in the British Parliament. Now, the citizens of the United States of America, they are being represented because you did have representatives from each state in Congress. But Congress still couldn't tax people. And if a government can't tax people, how are they supposed to raise money? Instead, what Congress wanted to do, or what they tried to do, was they basically begged for money from the states. But the states weren't just going to give money to the federal government. They wanted the money for themselves. And the U.S. government was unable to pay off its debt. So the U.S. government owed money to France, to Holland, and to Spain for loans, and they also owed money to soldiers that hadn't been paid off in their wages. This causes a lot of drama. The third issue with the Articles of Confederation are the international and domestic problems. The US government could declare war, but they didn't really have a good military. After the Revolutionary War, everyone just kind of leaves and they go back to their hometowns, and that's the end of the Continental Army. So they lacked the military power to defend themselves in case Great Britain tried to come back or Spain tried to come back to tried to come here to colonize. States were acting more like countries, and they didn't necessarily agree. The things that Massachusetts wanted was very different than what Virginia wanted. It was so bad that Connecticut and Virginia even threatened to go to war over land. If you guys remember your map, Connecticut and Virginia are nowhere near one another. But there was a lot of fight and a lot of animosity between the states. So overall, Articles of Confederation fail because there is no judicial system. There are no courts. So if you were having an issue like Connecticut and Virginia, who's going to solve that? They're not, what are they going to duke it out? Are they going to go to war? Are they going to fight? There was no courts there to actually step in and take care of the problem. There was also no president or no chief executive. I know that some of you believe that George Washington is not the first president. He is. But that job, that role of presidency, did not exist under the Articles of Confederation. So there was no one person to kind of represent our nation. If we had to have discussions with, France or with Spain, who would we send as our representative? There was no one. So not having a president is a huge fail under the Articles of Confederation. And then finally, the legislative branch, the Congress, the one thing that we did have, but it was too weak to actually support this new and growing nation. The Congress under the Articles of Confederation had one house. It was unicameral, which we talked about before. And you needed to have 9 states to agree on passing laws, which is very difficult if they were constantly fighting and bickering with one another. Congress was also responsible to the state governments, not to the people. So if the state governments decided to do something crazy and everyone in that state was against it, it didn't matter because the state governments were for it. They were working for the state governments, not for the people. And again, Congress had no power to collect taxes, to regulate trade, to make money, or to establish a military. All really, really, really important things when starting up a new country. So this is the Articles of Confederation. What they were about, and why they failed. You should be able to answer these 5 questions. What are the Articles of Confederation? What rights or powers did the Articles of Confederation give to Congress? And then what powers did Congress not have under the Articles of Confederation? The 3 weaknesses that we just talked about, and then what were the judicial, executive, and legislative branches like under the Articles of Confederation? Make sure you're able to answer these. Do not forget about the State of the Union address that's supposed to be going on tonight. There will be extra credit available on TeacherWeb for that, so make sure you check that. And don't forget to answer your blog. I will see you guys tomorrow.